Dr. Crichton, thank you for your well-prepared and interesting presentation. I think many of us who share your skepticism and troubles about the limits of growth, Paul Ehrlich crowd, are nonetheless maybe worried by what would be the extrapolation of your tone, which is that none of the things that environmental groups warn about are ever dangers, when in fact many things, toxic waste dumps, thalidomide, that they've drawn attention to over the years were very legitimate dangers. Apart from relying on fear and drawing on your theories of complexity theory, what would be the better way for them to draw attention to the legitimate problems of the world and play a more constructive role without oversimplifying or over-scaremongering?
Well, I think there's a few things that could happen. I've proposed the notion that there be fewer lawyers and more scientists. I was taken through one environmental organization, and they said at a certain point, would you like to see the library? And I said, oh, yes, I would. And I was taken into this room. It was a law library. Their library was a law library. It was a law firm. And I think law is a fine institution. It's not very good for managing environments. You don't have very much flexibility. A judge can't make orders that have much of a spectrum of outcomes. And I think the notion, what you can really do with a lawsuit is you can stop something. And what the consequences of simply stopping some aspect of a complex system, we have seen in Smokey the Bear. It hasn't been, the policy of fire suppression was a dramatic and extremely multi-decadal long mistake. The other thing is, I think that environmental organizations should be instituting procedures for them to self-assess whether the programs that they're promoting are successful. I think the Sierra Club and another group has actually made a set of 16 guidelines that they've asked studies that they're supporting to fulfill, and they discovered to their surprise that a lot of the studies aren't really very successful. So that notion of introducing rigor into outcome is a good one. And I think the final thing is that there's really been a drift, which is emotionally understandable. The environmental groups all started by trying to attack pollution, and they did it with great success and a great benefit to all of us in our environments. I mean, there's absolutely no question about the importance and the power of that first 10-year period, let's say. But it kind of set them on a path of eliminating substances from the environment, broadly speaking. And what you start to see, if you look at the graphs that are in Bjorn Lomborg's book that I could actually show you, but never mind, the thing is closed, is that the cost per life saved gets to be astronomically high compared to certain kinds of public health measures. And it's at that point that I think that you begin to say, why aren't we really looking to manage the wilderness areas that we've set aside and not pass benzene exposure regulations for the small number of workers that are exposed to benzene in industrial settings? And I think the movement has drifted a little bit, driven by lawyers, and sort of continuing to do what it's already done. And to address the issues of complexity and environmental management are really difficult and really daunting, and we have to face up to the fact that for over 100 years we've made a mess of things. And that's hard for human beings to do. But I'm confident it will happen. Are we back here?
You mentioned that in order for things to work, politicians especially, have to be willing that they admit that they make mistakes. They have to be willing to change their thinking. They also have to be pro-science. We're in an administration that considers creationism to be a science. Politicians in general can't admit mistakes, and they will spend lots of money to try to cover up for mistakes. How, without being totally crippled and not being able to do anything, how should things work? What are you suggesting as a solution?
Wait a minute. Are you asking me how things should work?
Yeah, in a complex world.
I understand. Okay. I think, well, what I'm trying to suggest to you is that politics in general is less important than we have all been inclined to see it. Well, for example, it seems to me one of the lessons of New Orleans that would not have been lost on someone like Daniel Boone is one of the lessons of New Orleans is if you expect a large bureaucracy of any sort to save you, you are a fool and you will not be saved. And I think it's a fundamental error of thought to imagine a bureaucracy will save you. I showed you images of the Kobe earthquake. Japan is a much more homogeneous country than ours. They have a very great interest in earthquakes. They have a tremendous legal system having to do with earthquake construction. They are very fast acting, very responsive. It was a scandal in Japan in '91 how long it took the government to get down there and to dig the people out, and tremendous numbers of people died. I think something like 6,000 because the government couldn't get there fast enough. It isn't going to happen, and I think in general I would like to see people starting to not look to our elected officials for solutions to everything. I met a lot of elected officials. It's not me, I don't want to say this, but Mark Twain did refer to Congress as the only Native American criminal class.
Dr. Crichton, would you say that the argument that humanity will destroy itself, the one that's been prevalent throughout all college campuses, probably for however long college campuses have been around, results from the state of fear that perpetuates throughout the Western civilization, as you said, or from an accurate prediction resulting from historical?
Would we say that college campuses have existed since 1100 or something like that? Oxford? Oh, no, we have to go way farther back. Who knows when Oxford and Cambridge started? 1300, okay. So 700 years. If college campuses have predicted the destruction of humanity for 700 years and it hasn't happened yet, what conclusion do you draw from that? I'm not making a joke. I'm being serious. You know, let me tell you a story. In 1978, I was asked to speak at a school in Los Angeles because the kids, it was a high school, and the kids were panicked over the impending nuclear war. And the parents were panicked too because they had decided that the kids knew something in their purity and wisdom that the parents didn't. And so everyone was riding this wave of panic and fear over a nuclear war. And I just went there and asked one question, which is, why is it that if something hasn't happened in your mind, that increases the likelihood that it will happen? David Hume actually asked the same question sometime previously. And the other question I said is, why do you believe they're your kids? They're kids. You're the adult. You're supposed to know. Tell them. You know, and largely as a result of my intervention in this school, across the United States, fear of nuclear warfare declined. Of course not. Okay. Irene is holding the hook, so we'll do one more question.
Dr. Crichton, while listening to you talk about fear, I was thinking of two newspaper articles I read this morning, and I'm wondering if you've thought about whether fear may be cultural or sometimes induced by language. The articles were talking about opinions of something that might happen, but the writer, instead of saying he thought something might happen or that it was opinion, in all these articles said he feared that it might happen. Do you think there's something in our language that's not necessary, but that may induce fear?
Yeah, I think that we have there's a wonderful Well, I've argued previously that there's now so much speculation rife in media. So many, the front page of the Washington Post said, it might happen that the troubles of the Bush administration could be a boon for Democrats in the coming election, as if no one has thought of this before. And also as if, the answer to that, the true answer to that is who knows. And that level of speculation on the front page of the paper, I know it's Sunday, but is throughout, if you watch Hardball or any of those shows, it's nothing but, well, what if this happens? Maybe this will happen. What if this happens? And I think one consequence of that is that people begin to imagine that speculation has value. Whereas, it's interesting, when you look at the New York Times from 30 years ago, they don't have that. They try and tell you what actually happened instead of what they think might happen. It's an odd difference. And but if you really were to identify all the things that are speculation, I said to Barbara Boxer, a prediction is never a fact. And she looked at me like, I like her, she's a friend of mine, but a prediction is never a fact. A prediction is a speculation. And if I think people can often live in a sort of panic based on, not on the world that they live in now, but on the world that they anticipate might be coming. And there's two things that are wrong about that. One is that you don't know what the world that's coming is. And the other thing is that the world right now is a pretty wonderful, terrific place of your fellow human beings, your family, and your loved ones. And why don't you pay attention to them now? And why don't you care for all the other people on the planet who are starving and dying? In the course of this talk today, more than 2,000 people have died in the third world of waterborne illnesses. We don't have to let that happen. We could structure a different world. And I think if we worried a little bit more about right now, instead of the year 2100, we would be more humane and more effective with one another. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming, and I want to thank Dr. Crichton for a very wonderful and stimulating afternoon. We're going to begin the book signing in just a minute, and if you have a book you'd like signed, the line will form over here to the right of the stage. We'll be bringing a table out, and he'll be back in just a minute. Thank you. That was a really nice way to end.